So as you probably know, I've been making a lot of samples for Serum 2 lately. And as you probably already know, Serum 2 has a couple of different options for synthesis now. As you can see, let's just look at oscillator B. We've got wavetable, then we've got multisample, sample, granular, and spectral. And as I was making my Serum 2 samples, I thought, oh, let me explore this multisample option. Now, within the multisample option in Serum 2, you have a bunch of options for instruments that you can choose, like this little drum kit, for example. But I thought to myself, like, okay, how can I make my own multi-sampled instruments? And from then on, I was pretty stumped because I couldn't find any YouTube videos on how to make my own multi-samples, at least not in detail. So you can correct me if I'm wrong, if there's someone else, I should say, who has already explained this. But I couldn't find anyone, so I'm making this video, one, as a reminder for myself so that I don't forget, and at the same time, basically help anyone else who is struggling with the exact same issue. So let's get right into it. Before we delve into exactly how to make your own multi-sample instrument, I feel like it would be amiss not to talk a little bit about how you should sample instruments in general. So generally speaking, let's say you want to sample an old piano, or like a flute, or a saxophone, or whatever the case might be for whatever instrument you want to sample in order to make your own multi-sample instrument within Serum 2. You basically, as a rule of thumb, you want to make sure that you're sampling from the lowest playable note on your instrument to the highest playable note. For example, this is very often an issue on synths. Like in my case, you'll see I sampled a DX7. I don't want to sample a note that's way too low, that's unplayable, like C-2, something that's like 15 hertz. And at the same time, you don't want to sample something that's 40,000 hertz that you just can't hear. You want to sample the widest possible range of notes that you're going to be able to play. Because when you're making multi-samples, you're going to see very quickly that file size adds up extremely quickly. So you can do things, you can make instruments that are super, super in depth, but they're going to require a lot of CPU usage. So it's always a game between balancing quality and file size. That's just a disclaimer. And when you are sampling, let's say like an old piano that you have, it's good to sample often in major thirds or minor thirds. So for example, you would sample the lowest playable C, and then you go in minor thirds. D sharp, F sharp, A, C, and it repeats. So in this case, it would be, let's say, for example, C1, let's say is the lowest playable note. It would be D sharp 1, F sharp 1, A1, C2, then D sharp 2, then F sharp 2, and so on and so forth until you reach the highest playable note. Now again, this might vary with your instrument. You might have, an instrument that it has a way smaller pitch range, and then so you can afford to sample every single note. You might have an instrument that has a super, super wide range, so even minor thirds or major thirds might be too many notes to sample. Every instrument is going to be slightly different, of course, but as a general rule of thumb, major thirds or minor thirds work best to preserve the quality and the integrity of the original instrument, but also to make sure that the file size isn't absolutely massive. I don't want to get too much into it because that's not really what the core of this video is about. The next thing that's important is your file naming convention. So whenever you're sampling, you want to make sure that you have really, really good file organization, and you're going to see in a minute, because when you start to make your .sfz file, when you start coding, and if things aren't named correctly, it becomes very, very confusing very quickly if you can't find the right sample. Basically, the way you want to name your files, let's say I have an old piano and I'm sampling C1, you would want to label it old piano, C1, and then if you want to include multiple velocity layers, you put the velocity. So you put like V30 or V90 or V120. This is a great convention so that you know exactly, you can immediately see in your folders like, okay, this sample is of C1, it's at this velocity, and you know exactly what you're dealing with that way. If you don't have multiple velocity layers, if you're not sampling multiple velocity layers, then there's no need to put the velocity, obviously. But I can show you in my case, this is what it looks like. So you can see here I have DX7, that's the instrument I sampled, A0 is the note, and then V30 for the velocity at 30. I chose, for my case, to use 3 velocity layers because the sound of the instrument changes a lot from the velocity at 30 to the velocity at 110. If you have an instrument where the velocity doesn't affect the texture of the instrument that much, then you don't need to have multiple velocity layers. Or if you just want to make a simpler instrument, you can forget the velocity layers. You can see why the file naming becomes extremely important, because when you're sampling, in my case, from C0 to C7, you're going to have a ton of files and you need to know exactly what you're dealing with. So next thing you're going to do is, once you have all your samples recorded for the instrument that you want to sample, you're going to want to download this program called Virtual Studio Code. It's right here. You can get it for free. It's an open source code editor. You're going to want to download it and open it up. Now, this is one that I already made. We'll get into this one. But when you open it up, you want to go to File, New Text File, and then you're going to save that text file in the same folder with all your samples. If you don't save your .sfz file in the same folder as all your recorded audio files, it's going to be very difficult to find. And I don't think it will work, to be honest. So make sure to do that before you start writing all these lines out. Once you have that, you're ready to start typing. You want to start off your .sfz file with this group, and then you're going to leave one space free. And then we get into these chunks of text. Now, this looks extremely intimidating, and it confused me for a while before I wrapped my head around it. But trust me, it's a lot simpler than it looks, because most of these text files just repeat. There's only a couple of values that you actually have to change, and those are the ones that we're going to go through. I made this little guide. This text in red is the text that you're going to type into the coder. So sample, pitch key center equals, Lokey equals, Hikey equals, Lovel equals, and Hivel equals are going to stay the same. And those are the anchors of code that are going to stay exactly the same. So those are the variables that you're dealing with. In other words, everything in red. And the purple stuff are the values that you're going to be changing. So you're going to start coding with group, space, then region. You're going to type it exactly like this. And then you can see here, we've got sample, pitch key center, Lokey Hikey, Lovel, and Hivel all ready to go. So now I'm going to explain what all those things mean. For sample, you're going to write sample equals in line 1, and then you're going to put your sample name .wave. I forgot to mention that when you're sampling your instrument, you want to save it as a WAV file, because that's the highest quality WAV file that you can save. And you want to export it at 32 bits. I'd recommend at 48K, but 44.1 is also fine, but you definitely want to make sure that it's a WAV file, because you want the highest quality file. And your sample name is going to be this, the way that you named your file, the way you organized it. You obviously don't have to name it in exactly the same way that I did, but you want to be able to identify it, because you're going to start from your lowest sample, right? So in my case, you can see sample DX7 C0 V30 is the exact name of my lowest sample that I have. If you don't type this out the exact way that it is in Finder, the exact way that your sample is named, this won't work. So that's another reason why it's super important for you to know exactly which files you're dealing with, so that the program can find it. So you can see here, sample DX7 C0 V30. That's going to tell it, okay, I want to start with this exact sample. Pitch key center is the MIDI note number. The MIDI note number, you can look up online, or you can look it up on ChatGPT. Here's a little graphic that I found just on the internet. It's a very useful graph, because it shows you the keyboard, it shows you the note name, the MIDI number, and the frequency. So, for example, I can look here and go, okay, C1 is MIDI note number 24, which means that C0 is half of that, which means it's MIDI note number 12. And we can verify that. If we go to Virtual Studio Code, you can see that the pitch key center for my C0 sample is 12. And if we go to C1, for example, you can see that my pitch key center value is 24. And that's only because the MIDI note number for C1 is 24. This doesn't change. This is just a standard value that never ever changes. You just have to look up what the MIDI number is for the note that you're sampling. That's very easy to do. So that's a value that you're going to have to change for each note that you sample. Next, you have Lokey and Hikey. Lokey is the lowest keyboard note you want the sample to play, and Hikey is the highest keyboard note you want the sample to play. And this is in reference to the keyboard within Serum 2. Let's take an example. Let's take D sharp 0. The low key value is 27 and the high key value is 29, which means that in Serum 2, when I hit the D sharp key, I only want it to play for 3 semitones. You can see it here, right? D sharp 0, this is still D sharp 0, this is still the D sharp 0 sample, and then here it transitions to the F sharp 0 sample. Now, this really confused me because the values are kind of arbitrary. They're very specific to Serum 2. So you're like, how would you know that this is note 27, for example? I just kind of figured this out by guessing. I forgot to write this down, but the value 24 is the lowest key in Serum 2, aka C0 in Serum 2. So just to recap, this note right here, C0 in Serum 2, is a value of 24. Don't ask me why. I think that this is a Serum 2 specific programming thing. So for example, if I want my C0 sample to play for 3 semitones, I would write low key value of 24 to high key value of 24, 25, 26. Because on 27, I want my D sharp sample to start. So I hope that makes sense. This part really took me a little while to wrap my head around because I couldn't quite understand the ranges because it's an arbitrary Serum 2 thing as far as I understand. Maybe I'm completely wrong. If someone understands this better than me, please write it in the comments. But you can see here, right? So my low key value is 0 here because, right, I just want it to start from 0. I want you to be able to play even lower than C0. My high key value is 26 because 26 is D0. And then you can see, we can infer, right? My D sharp is my low key value for D sharp is gonna be 27. Because remember, 24, 25, 26, 27. From 27 to 28, 29. So I want my D sharp note to cover the low key range of 27 and high key of 29. So let's see if that's correct. If we go to our D sharp, we can see the low key is in D 27 and the high key is 29. Again, because I only want my D sharp sample to cover 3 semitones because I sampled in minor thirds. And we can see that my pitch key center here is 15 because the MIDI note for a D sharp 0 is 15. Again, I just looked that up and slowly you're gonna start seeing that a pattern emerges. Basically, it goes in 3s because I sampled in minor thirds in my case. Right? So C0 is 12, D sharp 0 is 15, F sharp 0 is 18, and so on and so forth. Quick pause. If you want better sounds, I just dropped a bunch of free packs. I've got my Radix drum kit, my Afro House kicks, Tech House Serum presets, a Prophet 5 guide, and our Voyager Serum 2 preset pack. The link to all of those can be found for free below. Before we get too ahead of ourselves, let's look at the other values. Line 5 is Lovel and line 6 is Hivel. This is exactly the same as low key and high key, except it works with velocity and not keyboard notes. So you're going to want to include Lovel and Hivel values as line 5 and line 6 if you have multiple velocity layers. In my case, I do have multiple velocity layers, so that's why I included it. Again, if you only have one velocity layer, you don't need to include Lovel and Hivel. So Lovel is the lowest velocity you want the sample to play, and the Hivel is the highest velocity you want the sample to play. Just like low key and high key is actually a range, Lovel and Hivel is also establishing a range, except this is with keyboard notes and this is to do with velocity. So velocity ranges, I believe, from 1 to 127 in Serum 2. The way you split it up in your velocities is going to be up to you. I have 3 velocity samples for each note. My lowest velocity sample is covering from 1 to 60. The mid one is covering from 61 to 100, and the highest one is covering from 101 to 127. That seemed like a pretty equal split to me, and there's actually a trick where if for some reason when you start playing your instrument back and you aren't quite happy with the velocity, it's not the end of the world because you can always change the velocity curve over here, and you can actually compensate a little bit if you kind of mess up with the velocity ranges. So we can take a deeper look at the code here. We can see exactly what's going on now because now we understand all the values, hopefully. So they're grouped in groups of 3 for each note, right? Because I have 3 velocity samples. You can see C0 30, C0 90, and C0 at 110. So this is my first block. You can see that the pitch key center is 12 for all three of them, right? Because it's the exact same note. It's MIDI note 12. You can see that the low key and the high key values are 0 and 26, 0 and 26, 0 and 26, because I want all three velocities to cover the same amount of range on the keyboard. The only thing that changes is this split right here, because I want C0 to cover the velocity values from 1 to 60. I want the mid velocity sample to cover the mid velocities in Serum 2, so 61 to 100. And I want the high velocity note to cover the top velocity values, 101 to 127. That's basically all you're changing for each individual note. You're changing the pitch key center, which is the MIDI note for each sample, right? In this case, it's 15. And you're changing the low key and the high key values. So in this case, it's 0 to 26, 0 to 26, 0 to 26. When we move on to the next sample, it's 27 to 29, 27 to 29. When we move on to the next one, it's 30 to 32. The next one, A0, is 33 to 35. So you're just basically taking over from wherever the last one leaves off. And in this case, it's easy because they're all in minor thirds. If you look here, D sharp is covered, D sharp, D sharp. Then here it's going to change to F sharp. F sharp, F sharp, F sharp, and then A. And you can also see in Serum 2 here, you see how there's 3 horizontal sections. When I play softly, it plays the lowest velocity layer. When I play in the mid, it plays the mid one. And when I press hard, it plays the highest velocity layer. And then vertically, these are all the individual note samples. So as you can see, I've mapped about half of the keyboard, I think. I got to C3. I might as well just continue to do it in real time. That might be the best way to show you how this goes. It's all in groups of 3, and I leave a space in between each sample. So C0, 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 D sharp 0, D sharp 0, D sharp 0, F sharp 0, F sharp 0, F sharp 0, all the way until where I got to, which is C3. So the way I do it is you don't even have to type it all out. You can just start copying and pasting. So we got to C3. So my next note is going to be D sharp 3. So I'm just going to find a D sharp and I'm going to copy from here. Going to copy these, all 3 D sharps. Leave a space and paste it. So now we can go ahead and changing things, right? I'm at C3, so this isn't going to be D sharp 2. It's going to be D sharp 3. I'm going to go ahead and change that on all 3. Then next we have our pitch key center, which is our MIDI note. So we have to find out what D sharp 3 is in terms of our MIDI notes. And we can do that again by looking at a nice little chart like this one that we find on the internet. D sharp is what, 51. We can verify that. We can either do ChatGPT or just save a graphic like this. But we can also verify it just by looking at the pattern. So 45, it looks like it's going up by 3s. 45, 48. So indeed, this pitch key center is going to be 51. And I'm going to change that for all 3 since they're all the same note. Now it's time to change our low key and high key values. So we can see that C3 is covering notes 60 to 62 in Serum 2. So I'm just going to want to pick up where we left off. So C3 is 60 to 62, which means that my low key is going to be 63 to 65. And that'll cover that minor third until the next note. 63 to 65, 63 to 65. Now, these low key and high key values are of course going to change if you didn't sample in minor thirds. Again, you just have to calculate how many notes do I want my individual sample to cover. If you want it to cover 10 notes, it's going to be a difference of 10, right? It's going to be 60 and 70. If you sampled less, if you sampled like every half step, it's going to be 63 and 64, for example. But in my case, it's going to be 63 and 65. And the beautiful thing is that these low vel and high vel values for each individual velocity layers are going to stay exactly the same because I want that same ratio of velocities to stay exactly the same for each 3 samples, so I don't have to change anything there. So when you first do this, you don't want to do like 50 layers and then find out that you did everything wrong. You want to go File, Save, and then try it in Serum 2. We can see that the last one that I did covered until D2. So I just coded these three. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go make sure you're in Multisample here. Tap here and go load.sfz. And you're going to find it wherever you saved it. You can see it's saved in the same folder with all my samples. I'm going to open it. Now you should have those three notes that we just coded in. It's perfect. And they're all there. You can see all three velocity layers are right here. That means we did everything right. We shouldn't hear F sharp yet because we didn't code it in. So let's do F sharp. So I'm just going to find the last F sharp that we did. Looks like it's right here. And I'm just simply going to copy it. And then I'm going to leave a space. And I'm going to paste. So in this case, it's not F sharp 2. We're in F sharp 3 now. F sharp 3. F sharp 3. And again, I just want to really emphasize this name here after this sample equals value is the exact name of the audio file that you're referring to. So we can see here, we're talking about these three audio files right here. They're named in the exact same way that they are here. Again, if they're not, this isn't going to work. The pitch key center is the MIDI note. We're just going to follow the pattern, 48, 51, which means that this is going to be 54. And it's the same note for all three, so the MIDI note is exactly the same. Low key and high key, the lowest note I wanted to play is we're just going to continue 63 to 65, so I want this to play from 66 to 68. And that's going to be the same thing for all three. And again, the Lovel and the Hivel, those velocity ranges are going to stay exactly the same. So let's test it out. Let's test out if we did the F sharps correctly. I'm going to go File, Save, and we're going to see now. We don't hear anything on the F sharp yet because I didn't load it in. You have to load it in again. And now you can see our F sharp layers are there. So you're just going to repeat this pattern for as many samples as you have, basically, and then you're going to have a really cool, nice, playable instrument in Serum 2 within the multi-sample section. And that's pretty much it. I know there's ways there. I've heard that people have made automated ways to do this with AI and things like that. I honestly haven't spent enough time researching. I kind of want to do it myself, to be honest, at the beginning, because I was interested in learning this myself before I started using any AI automation help. And I couldn't find any YouTube videos breaking this down. And so, again, I'm just starting to do this. So if anyone knows a better way to go about this, or if I didn't explain something correctly, or you want to add some nuance to anything that I mentioned, really, please write that in the comments. I just wanted to make this video for myself so that I can remember things and so that I can hopefully help someone else. It looks absolutely terrifying, but it's really not once you understand these things. Remember that 24 is the lowest note in Serum 2, so this note is 24. That's that one arbitrary value that is quite easy to forget. And that's important to remember for your low key value and your high key values just to start off. And then after, like we did, you can just replicate the patterns for whatever spacing of samples that you have. So after a little bit, I don't even think about it. I don't even have to look up the MIDI note like you saw. But yeah, I think that should do it for the video. I don't want to make this overly long or cumbersome. I might make another video once I develop my instrument and I have a better idea of how this all works. I'd definitely be willing to make like an update video. But for now, this is it. I hope you enjoyed. I hope I explained that well. Yeah, I really hope I explained that well. Have a good week, and I'll see you back with the regular sound design videos next week. Have a good day. See you guys.